Hello, India. This is Vikas Singh, and proud moment की बात है कि right now I'm in Qatar, Doha, और हमारे Indian money, Indian currency में you can shop. जो भी आपको shopping करनी है, आप Indian currency ले सकते हैं और shopping कर सकते हैं. So thanks to Modi ji.
I bet you're wondering why a video with the words de-dollarisation and Indian rupee in the title starts with Mika Singh. Here Mika is making a purchase at a Louis Vuitton store at the Doha International Airport. But why is he thanking Modi ji for his latest designer purchase? That's because the payment for this designer purchase from a store located in a foreign land was not made in Qatari riyal or American dollar, but with Indian rupee.
Na beevi, na bacha, na baap bada, na maiya. The whole thing is that ke bhaiya sabse bada rupaiya.
For decades now, the American dollar has dominated world trade as a global reserve currency. The USD was involved in nearly 90% of global forex transactions, making it the single most traded currency in the forex market. And the United States of America and its allies have used the dollar dominance to their advantage in the form of economic sanctions. But did America take it too far by using excessive sanctions against Russia amid the Russia-Ukraine war? This use of excessive force in the form of economic sanction is making some nations reconsider their dependency on the American dollar. New challenges are arising to exploit the cracks in the dollar hegemony. Can the Indian rupee be a formidable opponent to the almighty dollar? Watch the video to find the answers, but before that, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the Moneycontrol channel. The US dollar is arguably the most powerful currency in the world. It's used in international trade, reserve holdings, and as a benchmark for other currencies. But how did the dollar become a global currency? To answer the question, we need to go back to 1944 to Bretton Woods Conference in New Hampshire. This meeting of the Allied powers during the World War II was held to establish a new international monetary system. The Bretton Woods Conference was a critical moment in the history of world economy. The US had just emerged from the World War II as a dominant economic and military power, and this conference solidified that position. At this conference, British economist John Maynard Keynes had proposed a new international currency called Bancor to replace the gold standard. But the Americans weren't interested in giving up their positions of economic dominance. So they proposed a system where the US dollar would be the anchor currency. This system, known as the Bretton Woods Agreement, established the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. Under the agreement, the value of the dollar was fixed to gold at a rate of $35 per ounce. The Bretton Woods Agreement was significant because it gave the US an enormous advantage in the post-war world. Countries around the world were now holding dollar as reserves, and the US could print as much money as it wanted without worrying about the inflation. But this arrangement by the United States did not last for too long because the country got a little too confident and overspent to fund the Vietnam War. By the 1960s, the US was running a trade deficit and its gold reserves were depleting. In 1971, President Richard Nixon announced that US was ending the convertibility of dollar to gold. To this day, dollar remains the world's reserve currency. According to IMF, central banks around the world hold around 59% of their reserves in US dollar. But over the last few years, cracks have started to appear in the dollar hegemony. The US dollar has remained the dominant currency for international trade and finance, and many countries have continued to use it as their main currency for domestic transaction. However, concerns about the potential risk of this dependency have grown in the recent years. This led to a phenomenon called as de-dollarisation. In simplest of terms, de-dollarisation refers to the process by which a country reduces its reliance on the US dollar as its main currency for the international trade and domestic transaction. But who is to blame for the demise of the US dollar? It's United States of America themselves, and let me explain how. Russian invasion in Ukraine in February 2022 triggered a wave of US-led financial sanctions against Moscow. Of these sanctions, 2 of them brought the Russian economy to a standstill. The decision by the Western governments to freeze nearly half the assets of Russian foreign currency reserves and the removal of major Russian banks from SWIFT, an internet messaging service that facilitates international payments, really hit Russia hard. The weaponization of dollar has made Russia and China, the two biggest geopolitical rivals of United States of America, promote their alternative financial infrastructure. But it's not just Beijing and Moscow. From India to Brazil and Argentina to South Africa, countries have accelerated efforts to shift towards arrangements aimed at reducing their dependency on the dollar. At the heart of this de-dollarisation initiative is the fear in many countries that the US could someday use the power of its currency to target them in the same way they have sanctioned Russia. India, like many other countries, is taking steps to reduce its dependency on the dollar. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been championing a multipolar world order, where the power isn't concentrated at one source.
आज मल्टीपोलर वर्ल्ड है। आज दुनिया का हर देश इंटरडिपेंडेंट है, इंटरकनेक्टेड है और उसमें हर एक की अपनी आवश्यकताएं भी कारण है और टेक्नोलॉजी भी रोल कर रही है। और ऐसी स्थिति में आज से 3-4 दशक पहले जिस प्रकार से दुनिया को देखा जाता था, वो काल बीत चुका है।
In a push towards a multipolar world and with an aim to make Indian rupee truly global, Indian Central Bank RBI has set up an international settlement of trade in Indian rupee mechanism in July 2022. When countries import and export goods and services, they have to make payments in a foreign currency. Since the US dollar is the world reserve currency, most of these transactions are entered in US dollars. For example, if an Indian buyer enters into a transaction with a seller from France, the Indian buyer has to first convert the rupee into US dollar. The seller will receive the dollars, which will then be converted into euros. Here, both the parties involved have to incur the conversion expense and bear the risk of foreign exchange rate fluctuation. This is where trade settlement in rupee comes in. Instead of paying and receiving US dollar, the invoice will be made in Indian rupee if the counterparty has a rupee Vostro account. The first country to get on board was the sanction-hit Russia, followed by a forex-deprived Sri Lanka. In March of this year, Union Minister of State for Finance Bhagwat Krishna Rao Karad informed the Parliament that RBI has approved 60 Vostro accounts connected to the banks from 18 nations. These nations include Russia, Singapore, Sri Lanka, Germany, Israel, and United Kingdom. These numbers clearly indicate a significant progress in the development of a rupee settlement mechanism. One of the key reasons India introduced the rupee settlement mechanism was to avail cheap crude from Russia and to evade Western sanctions. An even bigger motivation was to desire to push the rupee's acceptance in international trade and make it truly a global currency. But greater adoption of rupee in bilateral trades is only part of the process. For a currency to be truly international, a swath of conditions needs to be met, which are beyond the opportunity that a war presents. And one of the key drawbacks that holds Indian rupee from becoming a global currency is that it is not fully convertible currency yet. The level of convertibility of a nation's currency is crucial in attracting investors and other nations for trade. Dealing with a fully convertible currency allows a country to trade with confidence and give them access to transparent pricing. In order to be an international currency, India needs to boost its heft in global trade to persuade partnering countries to accept its currency. Even though India's share in global trade has increased to 1.8% from 0.5% a decade ago, it is no match for the United States of America. According to the data from the Bank of International Settlements, more than 50% of the global trade is invoiced and settled in US dollar. The share of the US in global trade is little over 10%. It is important to note that RBI has said that the rupee settlement mechanism is in addition to the existing trade and payment settlement that is done in dollar. It is an option that is being increasingly used by Russian suppliers. The same cannot be said by other countries. And even with Russia, there seems to be a reluctance to settle trade in rupee as of late. Given that Russia exports more to India than it imports, the negative trade balance has meant the Russian banks would be left holding more rupees than they need. This has caused Russian intermediaries to go slow with rupee payments. What India needs to do is to convince partner countries to invest in rupee assets, which would mean opening up the markets even more. Despite the challenges that lie ahead of rupee, it would be foolish to count it out just yet. The Indian government is taking important steps to increase acceptance of rupee on the world stage by signing one bilateral agreement at a time. only time will tell if the rise of the rupee will be at the cost of the dollar. For more such videos, keep watching the Money Control channel.